Hello, my name is Chris Rizal from eBoost. Thank you for your interest in this webinar today. I'm going to be covering the GA4 for B2B lead generation campaign. Just real quick, before I start the webinar, who's this webinar for? So I prepared this webinar for people who are familiar with Google Analytics and GA4 to some extent. It's actually a new version of Google Analytics that's replacing the Universal Analytics, right? And this is for marketers who are running lead generation campaigns currently. And also, this is geared towards B2B marketers who are familiar with Google Analytics and also using CRM tools like Salesforce, making business decisions to really understand what's working, what's not at the high level. And of course, anybody who's really enjoyed listening to webinars, sure, welcome. But this webinar is definitely not designed to speak to advanced Google Analytics users or administrators, as well as those Salesforce admins. All right. Just real quick about myself. My name is Chris Rizal. I work at eBoost. I've been here working at eBoost for about 5 years, and I head the operations as well as the analytics department here at eBoost. And I have an extensive background working at enterprise companies from both e-commerce as B2B, SaaS, and financial industries as well. Yeah, I like to travel, explore new restaurants, barbecue, and that sort of thing. So that's me. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So just going through the agenda as go today, we're going to be discussing about the key things I want to cover today is really the one, tracking lead generation performance with Google Analytics 4, identify content that's relevant to your target audience using GA4, and creating effective campaigns using data. So these are key 3 things I want to cover. And what I want is to make sure that you're leaving this webinar with key points to make sure GA4 is set up to support your campaigns. Also, to understand the value of integrating user behavior and customer profile data. Of course, know your possible next steps after you walk away getting inspired by some of the ideas here. All right. So the first topic that I want to cover as I go into this webinar is tracking lead generation campaigns. Like, what's the importance of it? Obviously, we all, as a marketer, tracking, reporting, all that stuff is a very important part of our work. But from my perspective, things I wanted to highlight in this webinar is a few things. Many ad platforms, they have their own proprietary algorithm to really optimize the ads to better target, and go after the target criterias that meet your advertising needs, right? Based off your campaign objectives and whatnot, so that it improves your performance of the ads. So a lot of that, the engines is really relying on the data, the quality of the data, right? So the concept of garbage in, garbage out applies pretty well here. Of course, if you're trying to optimize towards lead volume, you want to make sure your ad platform is marked up for lead gen, right? So the moment they become a lead, of course, if that's broken, your ad platform is not going to optimize correctly because it might be optimizing towards something else. And of course, your creative is definitely important, but in this particular webinar, I'm not going to be talking about the creative side of things, but the reality is it's not only about creative, right? So the focus here is on this topic is really more about the data side. And just an idea and some of the new features that we see in Google Analytics 4. One of them is actually predictive segments. This is pretty interesting because if you have enough conversion volume in GA4, it has this feature where it has a predictive kind of like way for Google Analytics to identify who's likely to purchase in the next 7 days or churn, return, or what have you, and then you can actually marry that with integrate that with Google Ads to better target the ads, right? So there are some pretty cool new features coming out in GA4 that allows to marketers to be more effective with data. And of course, for predictive models to work, obviously, data volume speak as well as the quality of data all matters. And that said, good data and accurate data for analytics reporting is definitely is an important part of it because garbage in, garbage out, inaccurate data, your reporting is going to be wrong. And definitely you want to track performance across not just one channel but across multiple channels, right? Especially if you're running campaigns on different kind of platforms like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, you name it. and Google Analytics 4 is one place where you have the UTM parameters, so you can actually check, different kind of attributions um, models and compare how different kind of campaigns influence your outcome. In the next slide, I definitely want to talk about how to use your data to track lead generation campaigns with GA4 and possibly others. But the in GA4, you definitely want to enable GA4 with the lead conversions, right? You definitely don't want to forget about. You don't want to forget about there are standard events, because in GA4 events you can actually how to say label in so many different ways you want. But if you look up GA4 and Google as the standard events, there are some out of the box kind of events that you can actually use or suggested by Google to use. So that's definitely one thing to kind of keep in mind. It's because, for example, if there's a standard event called generated leads, right? So definitely something that you want to use. And the second one here is that for Google Ads, you can import GA4 conversions to Google Ads. So your option is not only about using Universal Analytics and integrate with Google Analytics, Google Ads, but because as Universal Analytics gets sunsetted, your options primarily are going to be either using Google Ads, conversion tag, or the GA4 integration with Google Ads. Um, for many other ad platforms, definitely you're definitely going to use like tag management solutions like Google Tag Manager, GTM, to enable like Facebook Pixel conversion events tracking, various other kind of like ad platforms like pixels, and trigger various conversion pixels for that, right? So if you in how you kind of want to track your lead gen campaigns, it's not only about like getting GA4 right, but also getting your ad platforms pixel right, and you definitely want experts kind of working with your tag manager to make sure these things are fired correctly. Other means of integrating as well as tracking the lead is not only about firing the pixel. Sometimes you have offline conversion that happens where phone calls tracking or in-store conversions. You might have a business where your leads are actually not coming from the website. So from that perspective, there's like a CSV template that you can actually provide and upload the event data so that Google Ad recognize the offline conversions. And other means to kind of get the conversion data in GA4 is also measurement protocol event. So that's one way to kind of use APIs or uploads and whatnot to kind of get the offline conversion tracking in a different ways. Like can't think of an example now, but yeah. So like if there's like another store that is firing an event on another platform, this is one way to kind of integrate that conversion. Let's see. We definitely, as far as like tracking lead gen campaigns, it's not just all this stuff I mentioned, but also you definitely want to take consideration of like integrating web analytics behavior data with your CRM data, which has a lot of good, rich data around your customer profile and information. So through that integration, you're definitely going to see a lot of new possibilities in how you can actually use the data. So these are kind of things you probably want to think about as you kind of plan about your tracking your lead gen campaigns. Let's see. Just to double click into like how to use your data to track lead gen campaigns, specifically GA4. When you define the conversion events in GA4, like I said, like earlier, there's many standard events. You can actually customize, and label in however you want. In GA4, it could proliferate to extensive amount of conversion events. But within GA4, there's a means to kind of mark up each event as a conversion or not. So it's really up to you what you define as a conversion. So for example, if you do have a conversion of the generated leads, for you, if that's a conversion, you definitely want to mark it up in GA4 as a conversion. Make sure you're aligned with the team so that, when you mark as a conversion, it's really aligned to your business and marketing goals. I want to talk a little bit further about this because GA4 conversion event is really nested. What I mean by that is, it's not just firing like one event, but as you saw in the prior slide, conversion comes in different flavors, right? So from that perspective, the report that out of the GA4 might have reporting conversions, but you really have to switch this all event and really select the generate lead to really see the report reflect that. And the same applies to like, the other kind of, explore report, for example. You definitely want to set up to make sure that your conversion is tracking and reporting the right kind of event, not all events that you marked as conversion. And what I also mean by nested data, so it's not just snapping on the generate lead event, but you can actually add context to that, right? So in this particular example, you can add currency and the value for that particular lead. Or if you're using a sign up event, you can actually put a method like, is this sign up for newsletter or Google? So you can actually add more context to that particular event. So this is actually fairly, how to say, it's rudimentary. But when you think about like e-commerce business, even though it's not B2B, you can actually see like when customers make a purchase, on the website, it comes with a lot of information, right? Like transaction ID, the value of it, the tax, the shipping amount, currency, what coupon they use. You might have like multiple items attached to that one order. So it might have like a SKU item information, a discounted amount for that particular product, the category information, and so on and so on. So as you can see, like one convergent event comes with possibly multiple, like valuable information that you want to tack onto. So when you design the lead gen campaign in GA4, it's not just firing the general lead, but you also want to take into consideration of what kind of information you want to capture in GA4. I did mention about attribution earlier. When you know, Google Analytics 4 has different, not different, but rather kind of new channel definitions. Cross network, display, paid search is always there from before. Paid social too, but there's a lot more kind of like, new definition that you want to look up to make sure how's your UTM source and mediums can roll up to like what kind of like channel name. And of course, when you go into the multi-channel attribution report, I bet, more people are going to start using this in the GA4. But, you want to be careful because if you are defining multiple conversion events, you want to, select the one to make sure it's generate lead for your lead gen campaign. Or if you're using signups, fine, just use that. Otherwise, it's going to start reporting against all the conversions that you have defined. So from that perspective, these little things, it's easy to overlook. Also, just some example about the impact from bad tracking, right? I mentioned about garbage in, garbage out earlier. So, for example, a lot of times you're changing websites, right? And it's very common when you change website, things break, right? And this is actually pretty important because if you have GA4, say the conversion event is integrated with Google Ads, for example, and let's say the conversion, and this amount of spend you're having for that campaign, it's in learning period, and your campaign is actually learning, it's getting better over time, and your conversion rates is improving. You've seen the conversion taking off, but something happens, and all of a sudden your conversion goes down, your conversion rate goes down, and boom, you have to kind of, your the machine learning kind of has to go back and reset. So from that perspective, you definitely want to be careful. It also kind of throws like inaccurate data for you because you might be continue to get from conversion, but your GA4 is not getting that conversion recognized. So it's the impact is not just about reporting, but also your you need to think about the recovery period of your machine learning or the algorithm, if you will, on the engine side. Yeah, I want to shift gear to the second topic, which is about okay, well, within your lead gen campaign, it's not just about good data or driving leads volume, but what your prospects touch is your content on your website or your lead magnet or whatever means necessary that uh, they engage with the content, right? So which is actually an important touch point within the customer journey. So identifying relevant content to your target audience is going to be important. So in context of GA4, this is something that I want to dive in a little bit more here. So essentially what I'm trying to say is it's important to identify relevant content business target audience because it helps you understand what your target audience is interested in and whatnot. So understanding what that is helps you scope out like what you need to do on advertising and optimize or change or test. So by, and of course, getting those insights and what's working and what's not on the website through user behavior, creating the content that's relevant to your target audience, definitely it's going to help you attract and engage them more, more leads, and you know, essentially that might lead to better increased sales or revenue or more opportunities for you for a sales team. So, so a lot of times the lead generation ad campaigns rely on the ad platform's ability to target based on a few things, right? User profiles like demographic data from the first party data, right? It's like, hey, when you build a lookalike list or what have you that says, go after this type of profile, right? That type of data. And of course, the behavior data is going to be also usable when you're trying to optimize your campaign, because you could be creating a customer segment based off people who are engaged, or creating exclusion around the lead, so how people interact and who they are, these data very matters in how you kind of set up your campaign. And of course, what they search online is not just on search on the search engines, but also on your website. Hey, are they looking for customer support or are they actually looking for your service? These things are very different kind of behavior intent, right? And of course, the data comes in not just that, but also using the data for retargeting purposes. Are we do you want to target people on this particular kind of behavior or actions on websites, that sort of thing. And of course, your landing page, the first touch point that your prospects hit, through your lead gen campaign, definitely your content influences your prospect to take action, right? So any micro events that happens in a website is something definitely you want to track, and make that as part of your plan to make sure GA4 has that recorded. And stepping further into how to identify the effective content for your audience through using Google Analytics 4. Of course, I mentioned again, but tracking the events and create user segments. These are kind of like a very important concept in GA4. It might be so with the universal analytics, but a lot of the GA4, GA4 tracking, it has really shifted away from like page view to like event based, reporting. So from that perspective, these micro outcomes or even conversion events that we talked about earlier, like standard events like generate leads, search, select content, share, sign up. A lot of these kind of micro conversions or even conversions going to be really important, right? You can also define any custom events like downloads or inquiries. So all these kind of like action that happens in a website, you definitely want to think about how that's going to lead up to better acquiring leads. And when you create like segments, right, in Google Analytics 4, it has user-based, session-based, and event-based segments, right? So it's not only that, I mentioned earlier about the predictive kind of like the segments. Recently active users, people who didn't purchase, or likely to become inactive users in 7 days, likely to be inactive purchasers next 7 days. So there's a lot quite of things going on here, mostly for e-commerce still. But I wouldn't be surprised over time if they're going to start adding more that's not e-commerce. But in order to kind of activate this, you need a lot of data or a lot of conversion in a week. So, but just kind of good to know to see how Google has taken events as well as this kind of customer segments kind of seriously, because there's a lot of kind of good data that could be used. And by creating these segments, you can actually do a lot of good things with it from an identifying content standpoint. All right. So, for example, in Google Analytics 4, if you go to the left-hand navigation menu, there's a section called Explore. And when you get there, you can actually build some custom reports. As part of the function here, you can actually create segments. For example, in this particular example, I create a converted segment, people who became a leader, for example, right? Or people who engaged. That can mean anything, but you can actually define for yourself what it is. It could be a user-based segment, or it could be a page view, session-based or event-based. So once you define that, you can actually start using that segment to see, okay, for those people who converted, which page they actually access more versus people who just simply engage, So you can actually start seeing some differences. I mean, this can inform you which content is actually more meaningful for those people who came to the website and converted. So this might look very different from a segment like people who actually came to the website and did not convert. So from that perspective, like, you can actually see which is effective content or not. So creating effective lead generation campaign using data, right? So far we have covered the basics of, the high level of collecting the right data. The concept of collecting the right data is very important. And, I kind of talked about the setting up the GA4 relevant conversion data, some of the caveats that goes around it, and the importance of tracking results with these events, marketing conversions, right? And make sure those things are tied to the UTM campaign so that, the results of your campaigns, you see what's working, what's not. So UTM, the content of UTM parameters is not new in GA4, so I won't get into details of it. But of course, the third is analyzing data, right? So I mentioned about the GA4's user, explore report functionality. So, for you to identify what's working within your lead gen campaign from a content standpoint, there's quite a bit of kind of like um, custom reporting work that you probably have to do to kind of get deeper into like what's working, what's not from the user standpoint. The final tip here is, once you analyze the data, you can use it to create targeted campaigns, right? So maybe I could go more a little bit into that, but you know, everything you learn through your data here on the behavior side and whatnot, or even marry that data with the Salesforce CRM, you can actually take that learning and optimize your campaign by adjusting messaging, copy, headline, because you're going to get better hypothesis based off what you have learned. So I think there's two concepts that I want to kind of talk about. One is identify potential customers, right? So in order to create effective lead generation campaigns using data, the important thing is you definitely want to identify potential customers in a smart way. So data can be used to identify that, right? Who are most likely to be interested in your product or services. Use segments, kind of like what I showed earlier. And definitely, if you start marrying your behavior data with CRM data that has your, profile information, demographic information, even a markup or responses from your sales team to say this was a good lead and this turned into opportunity. So all those information about your marketing qualified lead, opportunities, closed deals, lost deals, these information is going to help you identify customer segments that actually interesting to you to test different strategies, right? And the second point I also want to mention is like, improving marketing messages. I kind of briefly touched this, but, data can be used to personalize your marketing messages in many ways, right? You have hypothesis because you learned that, oh, wow, this through this campaign ad or even different kind of like, different campaign efforts, you might have different content messaging that resonates to kind of convert. You might have different lead magnet that actually works better to kind of get that that you acquired through that lead magnet A, B, and C, white paper, ebook, checklist, what have you, and that might have different kind of effect and how it impacts like the downstream kind of metrics, like book meetings, pipeline measures, and stuff like that. So from that perspective, uncovering your user behavior data to convert that converts the traffic to a lead, web pages that qualify leads engage with, what kind of CTA they actually responded to. So a lot of this behavior data is actually a good signal that allows you to kind of help and understand what marketing message is going to work for your lead gen efforts. So just going a little bit deeper into the identifying potential customer here, on a technical standpoint, a lot we've been talking about, marking out your website with a good data so that GA4 has, good behavior data, with correct tagging and markup through GTM, right? But when a lead is getting created, a lot of times that lead goes into the CRM with customer information like email address. You're going to enrich that data with like a LinkedIn user, URL or something like that. You're going to have information about that domain, the company. When the salespeople get involved, they're going to mark it up whether it's a good lead or not. So, so you might get different feedback from the SDRs, BDRs, the salespeople who's about to close the deal or not. So when you marry that data with the behavior, a lot of times companies are using this in data sets from both profile CRM and the web behavior data and web analytics. they're using like CDP, customer data platform, that allows you to kind of understand well, which customer segment should I be testing and optimizing towards. A lot of times that CDP has good integration with like campaign ad platforms, right? And you want to onboard that data into that platforms in some way. And of course, this enriched data set, you can actually use it for reporting and analytics. So when I talk about identify potential customers for you, in the lead gen campaign effort, don't just thinking about measuring, campaign conversion, on the web analytics tools, but also look at, how that lead is actually, you know, being worked, as well as moving through your sales pipeline. And of course, using that to feedback into better improve your ad performance is definitely an important aspect of it. A lot of times, Google Analytics 4 is, if you have it set up so it's actually tracking user ID, that's great. I think the policy is that you're not gonna be able to put like their first name, last name, email address, credit card, and that sort of PII, personally identified information. So you definitely want to be smart about how you have that data in GA4 so you can actually marry it and analyze with the CRM data. So after all this, like what is this, what kind of use case do I have, right? In this particular B2B SaaS business that did a lead gen campaign, so typical demand gen, lead gen campaign is marketing, going after MQLs, right? Marketing qualified leads. But when you start looking at how, Meta Facebook advertising is actually impacting the book meetings and the sales pipeline, we were actually analyzing this at Salesforce, right? So Salesforce captured how that lead, which campaign the lead was generated from. And of course, a lot of times the sales cycle is long. So that conversion to that lead converting to close ones, let's just say it was like 60 days. In this particular example, is far outside of it's well outside of the Facebook attribution window, which is typically 28 days for offline upload, or the best standard is like 7-day click, 1-day view. So the platform data by itself is not going to give good visibility of what worked, what didn't. So the one approach is to make sure you mark out like different steps of the funnel, like people became the lead, but also they booked meeting, close one. So you want to make sure you have different kind of data that's tied back to the original campaign source, and when you look at, oh wow, the lead that we generated from Facebook campaign actually did convert it to like book meetings or pipeline. And when you have enough good data within that, you know, part of the funnel, which is could be significantly lower than the number of leads that you got, if it's significant enough that you can actually use it to optimize your, conversions and algorithm within Facebook, it starts to become a pretty significant, information for Facebook to start being optimal, right? Start performing. And of course, using enhanced Facebook conversion pixel is actually one aspect of it too. So to have Facebook have good data to optimize against. But essentially, once you have different good markup on different parts of the funnel, and you actually training your paid social ad platform well, you can actually start seeing some pretty positive effect, and your cost performance is actually going to go down. So this is what I mean by like good data. It's not just about reporting, but also using this data to optimize, because you actually influence different part of the customer journey. So there you go. Using the good day behavior data in optimizing a campaign and paid social for lead gen effort. You saw some good use case there. But just to wrap up this webinar here, I think the summary here would be good to say that GA4 would have good user behavior data. So track all the events, make sure you're using the Explore report. It's getting better and better about reporting the different attribution and visibility around different models. And of course, your CRM will have good details about your leads and customer information. So continue to enrich that. Make sure you design it so that your web behavior data in Google Analytics 4 is something that you can actually marry with your customer information, maybe through some user ID or some kind of ID that allows you to kind of marry those two information. And make sure I collect and track the right data for your business in GA4. So it's not just about purchase or leads, Like, how do you enrich it so that you actually see more than that, so that you actually start building better hypothesis and what you want to test and feedback into the you know optimization process. And yeah, take advantage of that user behavior as much as possible. You want to analyze effective content, because ads is one thing, but when they come to the page, landing page, different leads, different design on landing page, content, influence those people that you have actually brought to your website, right? So make sure you don't ignore those behavior that are there. And make sure, yeah. And again, I'll say this again, but integration through data and different data platforms is actually going to be important. So definitely don't want to overlook that as well. All right, so that's a wrap for this webinar. Thank you so much. But before we end this, a little bit about our company, eBoost. We are a data-driven, boutique agency based out of Southern California. Our parent company, Pistable, is in Japan, headquartered in Japan. We also have an office in Philippines, different parts of Japan. But we are a fairly large company there. So we are backed by a strong parent company. And from that perspective, we can actually enable a lot of capabilities that a lot of boutique agencies might not have in America. So yeah, to learn more, visit our website, ebusconsulting.com. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please do reach out to accounts at ebusconsulting.com, or please feel free to email me. All right. Thank you so much.